Well, what we've said before in Parliament is on the 18th of February last year, we questioned the government as to what they're doing about reinforcing our domestic violence laws to bring them up to date with current trends in the United Kingdom. For instance, in terms of coercive controlling behaviour, we're still trailing light years behind the United Kingdom, who in 2015 passed this legislation. It is also true that the United Kingdom, even last month, is looking at expanding the definition of domestic violence to include other forms of non-physical violence. And it's just a shame that we're not moving in that direction. You know, even the Royal Gibraltar Police have identified areas within which to amplify and expand the laws of domestic violence in our community. And although we've asked the question in Parliament, it's right as Gibraltar's opposition to ask that question, it's important that we also put our own thoughts ahead of that. What we will do in government is ensure that our laws are completely up to date, for one, as a starting position, but also look at it from a different perspective. We need to look at education. We need to talk to our people and have talked about their experience in domestic violence, link up with the charities, the care agency, and look at what their experiences are with domestic violence in our community and have an open debate about what's going on, sometimes in very violent situations and sometimes in very repressive situations at home.
Do you think that the problem could be slightly aggravated here in Gibraltar because we tend to think that a lot of things don't happen here and bury our heads in the sand?
I think that's relevant in our community in Gibraltar. It's also relevant abroad, but I do think there is a stigma around domestic violence. It is happening across the board within our community. If you look at the statistics, 337 people reported or reports were made to the RGP in relation to domestic violence. Can you imagine what's behind that and those that don't report domestic violence? And if you look at the age range of domestic violence and abuse in our community, it ranges from 6 months, baby, right up until the elderly. So it across a wide spectrum of people in our community. And we need to look at those offences because it clearly is a huge resource issue for the Royal Gibraltar Police, who need to respond to that. And they have a specific unit that deals with that. But we need to make sure that they're fully resourced in order to deal with domestic violence as it happens. But I think we need to approach it from the other end of the telescope as well and talk to the victims of domestic violence and understand why it's happening, and also talk to the perpetrators, because insofar as non-violent situations are concerned, they may not even know they're perpetrating this type of coercive and controlling behaviour. So I think more awareness in our communities is really important. More connection with the charities, more of the charities going out on the street to explain to people in our community what domestic violence is about, and also looking at how the refuge as well for both men and women who are the victims of domestic violence, and how that can be resourced and expanded to offer those services. So you can imagine a situation where a man or a woman is in or a child, in fact, or someone in the elderly is in a domestic violence situation. Where do they go if they don't have the economic resources to leave the perpetrator of this violence? Where can they leave the home if they're tied in economically to that relationship?
When we talk of numbers, you say that the numbers could be perhaps much higher. So not just legislation, but actually measures to encourage people to come forward.
I think measures to encourage them to not only make complaints where it's very, very serious, but also to connect with the care agency and social services in our community generally, so that we have that type of housing support, that financial support, access to legal aid where they will need lawyers to support them in extricating themselves from a domestic violence situation. So it's a very broad subject. And what we want to do is tackle this subject from a variety of angles, from the law enforcement area in terms of creating legislation to increase the ambit of domestic violence, but also on the ground, talk to the victims and the perpetrators of this violence so that we can get a real understanding of those familial situations at home and the circumstances which will lead to very damaging relationships and outcomes for children as well. I believe in early intervention services, and we really need to look at what we're doing at that level as well to stop it happening and stop it growing as a growing problem that we have.